And I would like Ms. Lynn Pollard did, as our vice chair this evening, if she would be so inclined.
I could do that, but I don't have an agenda.
We can go and look at the agenda.
You can't approve the meeting.
We can't approve the meeting minutes, so
Yeah. So we would just go directly to new business. The budget presentation.
right. Pull up the slides. But before looking at the slides, we need to talk a little bit about library funding. So in November 2008, voters of Clackamas County passed a countywide library district with a tax rate of 0.3974 cents per thousand assessed value. These monies are earmarked specifically for operations of libraries within the county. All assessed value within the city limits of Sandy is passed directly to the city for the Sandy Library. Somewhere around 44% of the population in Clackamas County lives in unincorporated areas. The assessed value of these unincorporated homes are pooled, and then the money is divided based on the population within the different service areas within the district. So the Sandy service area starts Dearborn and goes to somewhere near the ski camp, or maybe Ivy Bear. Yeah.
It's closer to the Ivy Bear.
All right. And then the Hoodland service area starts at Ivy Bear and goes past government camp to the Clackamas County border. So about 28,000 people live in the Sandy service area. Just under 13,000 of those live within the city limits. So there are over 15,000 unincorporated residents in the Sandy service area. And the Hoodland service area has a population of over 5,700 people. So, any questions about library funding or library service areas?
Do you want me to post the one that they'll ask you?
Sure.
How much do we get from the unincorporated? And how is that computed?
So the first distribution of this current budget cycle was about $780,000 for the unincorporated population. And just to give you an example, the people who live in the city limits, it's about 380,000. So it's a significant amount more that comes from the unincorporated population within the Sandy service.
I guess you can't have a slide for that.
I used to. Severely restricted, but I mean, even the presentation, if you look at the budget, it's yeah, each department has basically 2 or 3 slides. So because we've got so many different departments. All right. So the Sandy Library. Here is the high level of the budget, and you all should have in your packets the individual budget for the 2 libraries. You wanted to look in more detail at the budget as we're going through this. Please remember when you look at these Sandy numbers that the Hoodland Library budget is coming next. This will be the first biennium that the Hoodland Library budget is pulled out from the Sandy Library budget. So most of the numbers in the biennium 23-25 column are going to be lower than they were in the past because Hoodland's numbers have been pulled out.
When can we ask questions on those numbers?
I will, you can ask questions anytime.
Okay, so I was surprised by the carryover for the beginning balance is so much bigger going into the next biennium than it has been in the past. So I was wondering why that is.
For a long time, we had trouble getting staffing. So we were all working desks much more, and I had librarians were shelving, everybody was shelving because we could not get enough staff. And And we have finally filled all of our on-call positions, and we filled one, we created a 20-hour-a-week position from those positions to try to get somebody who would stay with us. So we are currently fully staffed, but in this past biennium, we weren't. So a lot of that carryover is from staff.
So the FTE projection that you had for 21, 23 was higher than what it actually ended up being. Okay,
I mean, in theory, we still had those positions, we just couldn't fill them.
right,
Yeah.
right. So you didn't actually expend the dollars.
Right.
And then the other question I have is that the debt service still shows on the Sandy Library department budget. And it had been my impression from the discussions with Tyler and Jordan that the debt service was going to be taken out of the department budget, put into the general fund because it is a general fund obligation. And that, of course, then whatever additional funds the city might give to the library would be net of the payment of the debt service. So what happened that didn't happen? Because we made a representation to LDAC in the annual reports that that segregation was going to happen.
Instead of doing that, because it's harder to maintain, and when we look at the Hoodland budget, you'll see that there are no previous numbers for this biennium.
Sure.
And so it's harder to maintain the knowledge that it's still there. I mean, so the city broke up the general revenue that they give the library to debt service from our regular revenue. And in the big picture, they have combined them to show the total that the city is giving to the library, $206,000. But you'll see that $9,292 of that, $90,292 of that is for debt service, and then $115,708 is the additional money that the city is allocating to the library this year.
Can you run that by again? So I got Kathleen's point, but so you've got the 2006 general revenue, and then
I'll show you on the screen, Kathleen, so you can see it.
yeah, no, I'm looking at your screen there, your handout, and then I get it. At the next one, you've got is it the transfer and the debt service?
This is what we're talking about. Instead of pulling the debt service out of the library budget, they created a revenue line for the debt service, separate from the revenue line of the money that the city gives us. So
Okay, I'm looking. Are you saying I can't see your screen on the way the TV?
I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and share my screen. I haven't shared it yet.
Okay. Because under the revenue part, I don't see a debt service line on the handout that you gave us.
Right. It's not on the large overview. It is on the detail. So can you see my screen now, Kathleen?
Hold on, sorry. My phone's ringing. Let me mute here. Shoot. Jesus.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can. Sorry. Let's try
Okay.
mother-in-law calling.
So
Okay.
this is the detail. This is the detail within the budget document itself. And you can see that the general revenue for debt service is pulled out from the general revenue.
Okay, got it. And does that still equal 2006 though? For
Yes,
the
it
general
does.
revenue? Okay,
Yes.
got it. All right, great, thanks.
Uh-huh. Any other questions?
Whose budget's gonna be less than? Was?
Because Hoodland's budget is pulled out, remember?
Because they've separated two, so you have to add those together.
Well.
But
Okay.
the previous biennial budgets had Hoodland included, And this one does not, and we'll do Hoodland right after we do Sandy's budget.
Okay, well, I was just,
Yeah.
the numbers weren't looking right.
Yeah. All right. So a few accomplishments from this current biennium. We have been working on, so we finished a link-wide strategic plan. And we have been working on our internal strategic plan for Sandy Library. So we did a lot of computer classes, had a civics challenge, and had English classes and reading tutoring. And then in the coming budget cycle, we are hoping to get some forward movement towards a new district tax rate. You may remember that right before the pandemic began, we had a meeting of a task force that was set to start that never got off the ground. And looking back in hindsight, it was pretty unwieldy, more than 85 people. And we, as library directors, are hoping to get some forward momentum to move in another direction, maybe with a consultant. Get that work accomplished. And then libraries are more than just our buildings, they're about community. The library needs to find funding for an outreach vehicle. Something that we can take out to schools, parks, senior living communities, and community events to bring technology and materials to people where they are, rather than getting everybody to come through our doors, which is not always easy for everyone. Sandy Library is working towards piloting a program in Clackamas County to get every kid in the Oregon Trail School District a public library card. I'm not sure if it will happen in this biennium, but we are hoping that it may. And of course, we are continuing to work on our strategic plan, which should end in June of 2024. So we will begin work on a new strategic plan soon.
I'm sorry, I'm just kind of catching up. Can I have a go back question on the budget thing, the budget slide? So just so I understand where the money's coming. So it's showing less general revenue contribution and less let's see. It's hard to kind of suss this out. I kind of just quickly did some math on the total budget for both Hoodland and Sandy shows like 3,300,894 in intergovernmental, which is, I assume, the library bond, right?
That's the tax rate, you mean? The library district funding?
Tax revenue.
Yeah, the intergovernmental line on your spreadsheet,
Yeah.
on your sheet. And so is that, so just to understand, we went from, like, in the last budget cycle, it was 2,875,000 for both districts. And now combined, it's 3,300,000, almost 301,000.
Yeah, that is the case.
Okay, and so that has to do with the value, everybody's property taxes going up. Is that right?
And the growth within the city of Sandy.
Right, okay. Well, okay. Yeah, it's just hard, it's all of a sudden when you go from lumping everything in previous budget and then splitting everything in this budget, it's a little hard. And I know people like myself and Don Hokinson, when you presented, and a few other little, left brain people will be kind of confused about what's going on there. So it might be helpful. I don't know how to handle that, but
I may just have to ask people to hold their questions until we do both budgets, if they have questions about the total budget for both libraries, so that they see the Hoodland Library budget on its own as well.
Can you-
Right, but then they, what I'm saying is you might kind of have one sheet there showing, what it was before combined and what it is now combined, just so that they can have, so you're looking at apples and apples. Because otherwise I had to sit there and copy and paste onto a spreadsheet and figure it out, like where, why is it going down here, but we have more money and all that, so.
I don't know that I can change this at this point because it's gone out to the budget committee, but I will ask Tyler.
Maybe you could do a handout that had the Woodland data adjacent to as a separate column here, so that someone just could visually could do the math. Or, have a sum of the two, and just have it as a handout.
Yeah, I mean, I just did the math. I could just send you the list of stuff and you can, if you want to make a new slide or something, I don't know if you're limited to slides or what, but it's just, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know that Tyler will let me make a new slide, so I may have to do a handout like Kathleen Drain has
Yeah,
suggested.
that might,
But
yeah,
I
just
can check.
adding one more column so that, or something, I don't know where you put it, but just kind of, again, looking, it's really helpful with the budget committee to look at apples and apples.
Which is hard to do when you pull a budget out of another budget.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and who asked for that, huh? The budget committee. Okay, so we have to take our medicine, huh?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. Yes.
I would suggest, but you said we may not be able to change your slides. I'm thinking that when people see the phrase, the task force, that phrase won't necessarily mean anything.
Well, that's why
your talk is better.
Well, that's why I talk about it. So my talk that I'm doing is gonna be for the budget committee.
Right.
So that's why I talk about the task force in my talk.
Right.
Do I need to talk more about the task force? A lot of the members of the budget committee will have heard. Yeah.
Okay. Then, no,
Okay.
not if your audience probably understands
Okay.
the concept.
There are probably, well, there are 2 new city councilors maybe. But I guess if they ask a question about it, I will clarify. All right, and then a few highlights of things that you will see in this biennial budget. Combined income has been reduced. As you know, Clackamas County libraries have been moving towards a more equitable service, and fines are a large barrier to our library patrons who need us the most. So all libraries in Clackamas County will be reducing fines from 25 cents a day to 10 cents a day. And I'm hoping that in the next biennium, we will be able to go fine free altogether. You will also notice that the miscellaneous revenue and general program lines have been reduced. The Friends of Sandy Library, who in the past had reimbursed us for program expenses, are no longer doing so. They have set up a direct disbursement of the library endowment, which is handled by the Oregon Community Foundation. And that endowment money is going into the library trust fund. So all library programs will come out of the library trust fund, which is a separate entity from our budget.
Where does that show up?
It's in the detail of the budget. So the library programs line is 0 this year. And the miscellaneous revenue line is much lower than it had been.
Right, but where does the trust fund show up?
It does not show up. I don't know if it shows up, it must show up in the budget somewhere, but I'm not sure how it shows up.
That's disconcerting.
Let's go look and see if we can see back here. Oops. Sorry. See if I can find where the trust funds are. the trust. It doesn't appear that they are in the.
It's concerning. I mean, one would want to be able to say, well, you know, I can go look at that. At, you know, page X of the.
It's in the monthly financial reports that go out on the city webpage.
Mhm.
I could go look at that and show you that.
Be all over that like. We're going on a boat.
It is.
Yeah,
Should I give it a budget?
it's not.
No.
May not be much in your total budget, but
The trust fund 7,
I thought I saw it there.
here we go.
It might be 710, keep going down. Because it looks like there's more than one under 710.
It's funny.
That might be the total trust funds within the city, right? I know I've seen it in this report at some time. I will figure out where it is and send it out to you.
how much is the trust gonna?
So in this last budget year, the disbursement from Oregon Community Foundation was just over $16,000. And I have just heard that in the coming budget year, it will be over $19,000.
Can you say that again, Sarah? You kind of cut out on the Zoom thing.
Sure, so in this last fiscal year, the current fiscal year, the trust fund disbursement from Oregon Community Foundation was over $16,000. And in the upcoming budget year, it will be over $19,000.
Over 19?
Yep.
Very good, thank you.
You expend all of that. You end up getting to zero at the end.
We don't have to, we can carry it over from year to year if we need to.
But do you, or,
Well, it was in our budget last budget cycle, so I haven't. We spent more than the amount that we had in our program line in the current budget. But yeah. Does that answer your question?
yes,
Okay.
well, actually, I do have another question on your slide. Yeah. But what, did you want to keep going through? We interrupted you when you were talking about the grants and the program funding.
Sure, I can finish up this and then we can ask questions. We've added 0.25 FTE to this coming budget biennium. And with that, we are gonna open an additional 2 hours a week on Saturday morning so that we can hold Saturday morning story time So parents who can't get in during the week to story time will be able to on Saturday mornings.
That's good.
Very good. So we'll be open for a total of 56 hours a week. And you saw in a slide earlier that our total FTE for Sandy Library is 11.05 in this biennium. Also, library directors in the county voted to increase our library ebook and e-audiobook amounts. So we've increased spending by 15%. It's the first significant increase we've seen in a long time. And I'm hoping that the library directors will see all of that increased usage in the applications and will increase it again in the next year. So I've added a 15% increase in both years. And finally, our computer line has a large dollar amount because we need to purchase 17 new computers. The staff computers we'll be replacing were purchased in 2016. And the public laptops and the print release station are even older than that. So, and a lot of this money, the computer money, is carryover from the Friends of the Library fundraiser, where they fundraised $36,000 for library computers. So in the current biennium, we have purchased the public printer and photocopy machine with that money, and also 10 public computers.
So how much will you still have available
Of what?
out of the Friends fundraising?
Well, it depends on how much our computers cost. Yeah. Well, you can see the line for the computers, and I've got something like,
This is in the detail.
yes,
Okay. Computer.
computer equipment, $23,200 is what I budgeted for it. So that will more than spend the Friends money. We've already bought 10 public computers and a photocopier. So do you have any more questions?
I'm thrilled to see the increase in ebooks and audiobooks, and I kind of, for some reason, the audio keeps cutting out. I don't know if if everybody's not muted, then any kind of little background sound cuts out your audio. But on the new computers, and I was curious what a print release computer is, and then also I thought I heard something about 10 existing computers, and so how many total public computers would we have then?
We're gonna get 6 new laptops, I think is what's in there. 4 new laptops, sorry, and 6 public computers. We may not need all of those public computers. We're still starting to see people come back, so we'll see how many we end up ordering. But we wanted to have the money there in case we do get more patrons back using the library computers. A print release computer, Counselor Walker, is, so you sit at a computer and use it, you send your print job, and you have to walk over to another computer to release it to the printer and pay for your printing. Does that make
Okay,
sense?
great. Yep, thanks. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Any other questions about the Sandy Library budget before we move on to Hoodland?
Cheyenne is on, so we have a quorum.
All right, we could go back and. You're not. All right. Hoodland Library. So again, this is the first year of pulling out the Hoodland Library budget. So unfortunately, it's hard to see trends in the budget. But starting in the next biennium, we will begin to see some trends, hopefully.
Hoodland not segregated by account number previously?
They had, no, it was not. They had numbers within our budget, but they had the same beginning budget number
Oh,
of the Sandy Library. So now they have their own. Does that make sense?
Well, yes and no. I mean, the data couldn't be extrapolated from prior at least one biennium back.
It would be a lot of work.
It would be.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you will see that Hoodland has, we've accomplished some of our strategic planning goals at Hoodland. And in the upcoming biennium, we have, similar things to what we've got going for Sandy. We're gonna try to get every kid in Oregon Trail School District the library card in Welch's school, it's part of Oregon Trail School District. We're working on the strategic planning initiatives, up at Hoodland as well. And then you would notice in last year's accomplishments for Sandy, or this last biennium, we have that we analyzed collections for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in this biennium, we will analyze Hoodland's collections for those things. A few budget highlights for Hoodland. So Hoodland is starting with 10% of what would have been the total carryover for Sandy and Hoodland. And as most of you know, Hoodland has somewhere between 1/4 and 1/5 of the business of Sandy and has 21% of the staff. They are starting with less than 20% of the carryover because I feel like most of that carryover came from the city of Sandy, possibly. And so we're starting with most of that carryover at the Sandy Library.
Not sure how I feel about possibly. It may have come from the city.
Well, the city of Sandy gave us about the amount that our carryover is this year in the last biennium. So if you look at it that way. Yeah. But I mean, Hoodland has a much smaller building, they have much fewer repair needs, all of those kinds of things. So, yeah. Any other way I could phrase that you feel would be better?
The confusing concept to relay, you know, how to, the attribution.
Yeah.
So there's no, you can't evaluate a the carryover value by looking at the different budget line numbers from this biennium.
We don't have all of the Hoodland budget outlines separate from Sandy. I mean, I went through and looked to see, and I feel like that's pretty accurate for what should be the carryover, but it's hard to show that because all of those budget things are mixed together. Like for the contractual services, for most of the biennium, they were in one line. So you have to sort through them and see which ones are Hoodland, which ones are Sandy's, and then go from there. See what you feel like is unspent. It's hard to know sort of what is unspent anyway. We didn't spend it.
I was also going to say that this doesn't show any rent payments that we're possibly going to get from Clackamas County. And so any rent payments that we get from them would then increase the not the general fund, but whatever the overall budget, operating budget at Hoodland, correct? To offset
Yes.
some of that issue that you're raising about beginning balance.
But there has been there's been no response to our request as of yet, so.
Well, that wouldn't go to the beginning balance because they wouldn't cover the rent except prospectively. Kathleen, so it won't affect the beginning balance.
No, but if we get it in 6 months or something, that will increase the overall
We'll increase the
operations
overall
budget.
budget for Hoodland.
Right.
And we'll be
not the
able to
beginning balance.
increase their selection budgets and you'll, if you look at the detailed budget for Hoodland, the programming line is. There's $1,000 in programming for Hoodland in the budget, so for 2 years, so $500 a year, that doesn't. Get almost anything, so we would be able to increase the programming and the selection lines for Hoodland.
Would you consider hours at all, or?
Yes, we would consider hours, and in fact, in this coming budget cycle, we've added an additional 3 hours per week. And that will be, right now, they're only open one morning, so that we're gonna be open 2 mornings.
Oh, so you're, does it say that?
Was that mandated though, because we were so close to the?
When I could have, instead of increasing the staff hours, I could have increased the selection in the programming lines.
Right.
But I opted to increase the staffing so it could be open longer hours.
Then when we were talking to the county, that Hoodland was.
We're like 1 hour away from our minimum.
Right.
Yeah, so now we would,
So now we're.
we would be 4 hours away from our minimum.
So if you don't list the additional hours as a.
It's on the slide that's on the screen right now.
So confusing.
That's
That's why it's down, it's just
Yeah. So I jumped ahead to the additional FTE that we're gonna have, but again, the fine estimate came from Clackamas County for reducing our fines to 10 cents a day, so that's in Hoodland's budget as well. And then the 15% increase in ebooks and e-audiobooks for each year. And then the computer line for Hoodland is larger than you might think. Because we need to purchase 2 public computers, 2 laptops, and the print release station, which are all quite ancient. They're older than Sandy's even, I believe. Some of them were hand-me-downs from Sandy's, so.
I did my first send a print to the library. Pretty handy.
Yeah. So that is the end of my presentation. Are there any final questions?
question.
Mhm.
So where are we on unallocated costs this year? Since we didn't get the details with the stuff that you had sent out to us at home, I wasn't able to check that. How did we do in terms of the burden?
So let's see, so the $206,000, right, that we got from the city for debt service and operations. And then our indirect support costs for Sandy are $272,456.
That 206 includes the debt service, right?
Yes,
So
it's really, we're getting $115,000, yeah.
I can tell you what the numbers were. I have the total, like if you look at the BN 21-23 proposed for the, combined last biennium, the new number for combining both Hoodland and Sandy for beginning balance, it's 387. You might want to write this down, 387,322. The intergovernmental is $3,300,894. The fines is $23,544. The grants are $12,214. Miscellaneous revenue is $8,500. General revenue is $206,000 with a grand total resources of $3,938,474. And then going down to expenses, personnel is $2,934,000. Materials and services, 442,450. Capital outlay is 32,900. Debt service, 90,292. Transfers is 340,570. And contingency is 98,262 for a total requirements of 3,938,474.
I have a different question just on the Hoodland Library. With that $1,000 budgeted for programs, that is out of the Hoodland budget. It doesn't reflect any money that the Friends of Hoodland might raise.
That's true, but the Friends of Hoodland money that they would reimburse the library for is in miscellaneous revenue, so $2,500. So there is some Hoodland Friends money in the budget, sort of as miscellaneous revenue, if you think of it that way.
That figure is based on what they've contributed in the past.
So I cut some of that. So Sarah, the grant, so the Friends of Hoodland or Friends of Sandy Library funding is not included in this budget? Or is part of it included under the grants, or can you just explain that again?
The Friends of Sandy Library money is not included in this budget because it is dispersed directly to the library trust fund. The Friends of Hoodland Library, there is an amount in the miscellaneous revenue that I would assess to be maybe 50% of the Friends of Hoodland Library. 50% of that money comes from the Friends of Hoodland Library.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Students and direct support costs. Puts Hoodland's almost 9%. This budget. That's not insignificant. You know, before when we larded them together and took the benefit of what the city gave to the city of Sandy, it made it look like it was a lot smaller than it actually is, so. I think I know that I want to look at I know in the budget, the indirect costs are laid out by department, and I haven't had a chance to look at them yet, so I'm gonna want to look at that again.
Right.
When do you make your presentation?
Tomorrow night.
So when can we bring up this issue if it's something that is troublesome,
Issue of what?
the indirect costs charged to them?
And you can bring it up whenever you like. I don't know that they will be able to do anything about it this biennium.
In this process. Disturbing. And we get the data so late that as a library advisory board, we do not have the time in which to make comment to the city.
You're welcome to come to the budget committee meeting and make a comment.
I might.
Hey, Sarah, so help me understand. So I'm looking at your budget list and I hear what you're talking about. Where is the overhead or whatever you're calling that?
The indirect support cost. And
Okay,
it's
that's
68,000.
Okay.
It's in the detail of the Hoodland Library budget, which I can pull up for you. Let's see. If I passed out the budgets here in person, Counselor Walker, so you're not able to see them
Oh,
unfortunately.
I see. Okay.
They weren't ready by the time I sent out our agenda, so there's the indirect support cost line for Hoodland, $68,114.
Okay. So, I mean, as a city councilor, part of my response is that, the alternative of having Clackamas County run the Hoodland Library, that overhead tap would be so much larger. I think it's a pretty good deal considering the overall budget.
I'm not sure about that, because you see, under the district, the obligation is to only charge those costs that are directly attributable to the operation of the library. So whatever Clackamas County might have wanted to do doesn't really matter. What matters is what's permitted under the district, and this is what we worked so hard with Tyler 2 years ago. But then we had the consolidated budget, which didn't really disclose the extent of the burden being placed on Hoodland. So the question is, without being able to look at the attribution to Hoodland, which I haven't had a chance to do yet, one can't really say whether it's reasonable or not for us.
Well, Kathleen, where I would come from is that, the Sandy Library, Sarah and her staff and Angie and Tyler and all those folks that keep everything going and do the contracts for the rent and the cleaning and the paychecks and all that stuff is takes time, and trying to wheedle out exactly how much it is for exactly however many employees are up there and all that is not, it's trying to thread, whatever, how many angels can dance on the pin of a head kind of analysis. And I think that, again, I guess my point would be that, everybody needs to pay their fair share, because otherwise, other departments in Sandy do not, end up subsidizing the costs for other departments, and we don't really want that. And then equally, I think we want to incentivize the continuation of Sandy being the leading partner on this partnership. And again, if it was Clackamas County doing it, I know for a fact that it would be a much larger share. The overhead tap would be a much larger share. So I guess I wouldn't necessarily push for, less money. I think we're already doing a lot by trying to get them to pay the rent. And I feel, hopeful about that, since it's not that much money. I think that's the better road to plow, or, so to speak, than trying to dink around with, again, trying to figure out exactly, all the costs associated with the overhead of the library. You all have the library has the second highest number of employees of all the departments in Sandy. So it's not a small workload that comes along with all that. So I guess that's where I come from.
Right, and we've always agreed that, whatever is a relevant cost absolutely should be charged. There is no question about that, Kathleen. It's, some of these other things, which I think Tyler had sussed out quite well when in his analysis I guess it was 2 years ago, but we never looked at it just directly as equivalent. So I would like the opportunity to do that.
And it's really, what is the percentage of the overall Sandy budget that goes to that same thing? Because the point is, it's a significant portion of Hoodlands at 9% or whatever.
Right, I haven't run the numbers yet, and one of the things that the city had always done so graciously in the past is significantly covered a portion of those costs, which of course Hoodland doesn't have the luxury of having a similar level of protection. I'll look at it tonight, and if there's anything I need to bring up, I'll bring it up tomorrow night, Kathleen, if that's okay.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
I just know, I'm just kind of speaking on behalf of some of the other counselors that kind of are asking, why isn't, Clackamas County running the Hoodland Library? Why are we doing that? And I think it's a benefit to all of us, for that this partnership to continue. And I don't think it would get any cheaper if it was Clackamas County. So that's where I'm kind of coming from is that I think it's, yeah. And that said, like I said, it's very difficult to dink out all the different things, but it needs to be equitable, whatever that is. What is the share for indirect on the Sandy Library? Do you have that since you got the
Yeah.
budget up?
It's 272, 456.
And what percent of that of the minus the mortgage payment is that? Does anybody know what that is? Is it about the same percentage?
115 would be subtracted if you were to net the benefit that the city gives on top of, separate and apart from the debt service.
Well, yeah, I mean, you should,
Percentage.
yeah, you should take out both the debt service and the general fund contribution and then see how much of the indirect costs is to that total.
I can tell you that in the past, the consolidated was approximately 3.8% net. But now that we've broken out Hoodland, I'll get my phone and I'll figure out.
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look at and crunch some numbers, before tomorrow night and then have more discussion maybe. I welcome you to, make a comment. I think there is a comment opportunity at the budget meeting, Kathleen.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
Any additional questions about the budget presentation? Any comments, thoughts on things I should change or add? It is going to be sort of tricky this year because of pulling the Hoodland budget out. It's confusing, I know.
Yeah. But if you were asked to do it.
Yep.
And it's better for the Hoodland.
Right, and we'll be able to see the trends long term.
Yep.
This will just be the first of many.
Yeah.
And just addressing, if Clackamas County were to retake over the Hoodland Library, it would be problematic for Sandy. We would have a lot more costs in our budget, like the Hoodland FTE includes 4 hours a week of my time, 4 hours a week of Chris's time because she catalogs all the items for the Hoodland Library, 2 hours a week of librarian time for adult services, 2 hours a week of librarian time for kids services. So it would be a significant hit to the Sandy budget.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think it's at all a good idea.
Yeah.
For either one of us. So
Right.
Right.
I mean, it's much better to be managed by somebody who's close by than somebody who's far away.
So Kathleen, the net indirect support cost comes out for Sandy at 4.86%. Versus just figure out what the versus 9.53% for Hoodland.
Sorry, what did you say for Sandy?
It nets out to 4.86, but that's because of the city contribution. So my guess is that
I'd be looking at it minus the city contribution, minus the mortgage payment, and then
payment doesn't come because what I already netted that out because the mortgage payment just goes to the mortgage, right? And so you subtract that from the 206, you get 115. So I just took away 115 from the 272.
Well, I'll take a look at it and before tomorrow and
Right.
maybe, yeah, we can have a discussion then. I don't have all, I just downloaded the budget and the library stuff. I was gonna review that tomorrow. I just got my taxes done yesterday, so
Yeah.
I'll take a look at it though. Yeah.
Back to the agenda and approve the minutes if we do in fact have a quorum.
Let's acknowledge that.
Let's stop sharing my screen for a moment.
Okay, Cheyenne, are you there?
I don't see,
You scared her away.
we must have lost her at some point.
Well, then never mind.
Yeah.
So
We're in the minutes from the last time. There we go.
old business, tell that update.
We're meeting next on May 15th. We're supposed to hear a proposal from Savas on possible alternatives to the task force concept. We'll discuss the network budget, but I'll wait for Sarah to give the report on that. And then the existing dilemma that remains is that LDAC still has neither approved nor disapproved those annual reports for the 4 fiscal years. And it's not clear what we should do about that. I talked to the network manager about that concept. My motions requesting the referrals were tabled. We may need to re-invoke them, amend them, and just ask for a vote on the annual reports, but probably not at this meeting. But that's still pending undone business that needs to be done. Just haven't figured out strategically how to handle it, even if it's just the up or down on the actual reports themselves. So that's all there is on LDAC.
Network budget update.
We've had some exciting, possibly, improvements in the network budget situation. The county administrator, so there were 2 items that they were considering, which would have affected libraries directly in the county, and they have kept those items in the network budget. So apparently they were considering getting rid of Sunday service, the courier service. And then there was the Kipu ePass software. So when you download a pass to go to the Oregon Garden or the Portland Art Museum, that software that you use to do that is currently paid for out of the county budget, network budget. And they were going to try to pass that on to the libraries. So they are no longer planning to do that. So there is still a cut to the network budget, but it's internal things that apparently won't affect the rest of the libraries.
Will it, so networks capabilities will remain intact?
Their current level of service should be maintained.
That means you'll still have the Sunday.
Yes, we will still have the Sunday courier service.
We are supposed to get a report on the 14th at LDAC of where that stands and if there is anything that needs to be lobbied for or not. So we won't know that till.
Hoodland rent memo progress. None.
Well, you need to report to them on what happened.
Nothing.
We haven't met since we met with the county.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Goodness. That's right. Such a long time ago. So the meeting was actually surprisingly cordial. And began with Administrator Schmidt apologizing for the tone of his email or clarifying that he did not mean it to be as terse as it came out. I also acknowledge that the Hoodland Library had clearly been underserved. Following on, there was just a discussion about the request for looking at the rent, the general discussion. No promises were made, but they were going to go away and discuss it. It was going to take a little while. He said they had some ideas. It felt reasonably positive, but there's been absolutely no contact since. I have no idea.
Does that mean Jordan hasn't heard anything either through the informal discussions with the administrator?
I'm guessing that he hasn't.
Because Jordan was administrator asked him to stay behind and discuss things.
Yeah. And he also felt favorably about the meeting and felt like it was a real possibility. So whatever they discussed afterwards
Yeah.
was just as good as what
Yeah.
they said in the initial meeting.
So when would you expect to know that from the county budget?
Well, Schmidt said that he was expecting to make his budget presentation in May,
Okay.
towards the latter part of May. So my guess is they're still pushing and shoving
Yeah.
numbers around.
Trying to figure out what they can
The one thing is this new department head that we're under. So we moved
back to the transport one.
right, this Dan Johnson. He seems to look at the world very differently from the way the business and community services to look at it. So hoping that in itself is that his attitudinal difference is beneficial to us. I'm hoping. But it's going to be, I don't know that it would come out of his budget because, we were advocating that it come out of the general fund,
Yeah.
but I don't know whose budget it would end up bearing.
Yeah.
I don't even know if this would be in the budget. I mean, it's hard to
It
know.
might be a
It
contingency.
might be contingency.
Yeah.
If they decide to do something or, I mean, it's hard to know what their ideas are and what. Yeah,
Right, because we did acknowledge that this could be something that could be at least taken care of, Kathleen, in the short term pending seeing what happens with the library district task force and things in general, or what county buildings the county might end up actually funding or supporting up in the Welch's area that might affect us. So we said, could you at least consider this for 5 years and then, we'll talk about it again.
Well, I think, I don't know if you guys have heard, but Jordan is moving on. He's taken the city manager position in Redmond.
and sisters.
And Sisters, I mean, sorry.
Wow.
Right, sorry. I know, I thought Redmond, Sisters. And so he is probably leaving sometime in May, at the very latest, the end of May. And so I think that what we should be doing here is having Jordan follow up with either and, especially Gary and Dan, and just trying to get a clear answer on, what's included in this proposed budget that they've got, and at least, do a status check. And then depending on how that news goes, there's, the reason you got that apology from Gary was because Stan called up, I don't know who, I don't know if he called up Gary or who, or above Gary, but, that's why you guys, it was not a very good memo. And
Stan.
Stan Pulliam,
Our mayor.
yeah.
Please thank him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I brought it forward to the city council and kind of mentioned, I read a little bit of it into the record there in the city council about and how I thought this was kind of a pretty condescending letter and stuff, and Stan didn't like that at all. And then the next thing you know, that that happened, you know, we got it, the apology that we should have had, and just
Yeah.
treated as a little bit, you know, as equal partners and all that. We're all partners. We're all on the same team. And so that, and you know, Stan has you know, is pretty tight with Tootie and Ben West, and also Mark Scholl. Mark Scholl lives right out here off of Bluff Road. He's a neighbor of mine. He's outside the city. And I do believe, well, yeah, I think he's the only one that lives out in this area. But,
Yes.
and you know, he's not on my Christmas card list, but it's good to have, you know, connections with those folks because they can carry the water for us and, you know, talk to their staff about, you know, because Hoodland can be the, you know, orphan stepchild or whatever you call it. And it's really important to, you know, make sure that Hoodland is getting treated as the gem that it is. They get a huge amount of tourism tax and property taxes from this area. And it's important that, yeah, they get recognized. So let's have Jordan follow up with Gary. And then depending on the answer we get, we have some options. I think Stan and myself and others can kind of do a little bit more pushing from the top down if need be, to kind of, you know, it's small potatoes. Really, it's like a couple French fries. It's not even a whole potato. So hopefully we can, yeah, you know, make that happen for us, because I think that'll really help out the operating budget at Hoodland.
That'd be great.
Sarah, will you follow up with Jordan?
I will.
Great.
So,
It sounded promising at the time.
Madam Chair?
With my staff updates for Adjourn.
Okay, staff updates. I was just gonna update you about Jordan leaving, so we've already done that, so. Thank you, Counselor Walker.
Sorry, sorry about that.
No, that's perfect.
And is there anything else? Any announcements, any? And if not, we are adjourned.
Great.
7:12.
Thanks for putting all that budget stuff together, Sarah.
Yep. Thank you for listening and asking questions.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.